The Secrets of Star Wars is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
You're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars, episode 55.
Hello there.
It's a power that Jedi have that lets them control people and make things float.
Impressive. Every word in that sentence was wrong.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
It's against my programming to impersonate a deity.
That's not how the Force works.
Force is with me, and I am with the Force, and I fear nothing.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
Hey everybody, I'm Father Andrew Kinstetter, aka Father Fett, and you're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars, where we talk about everything connected to that galaxy far, far away, including the deeper themes and meanings. And today we're discussing the exhilarating finale of Star Wars Rebels. So this is Season 4, Episode 15, Family Reunion and Farewell. Joining me today on the panel are, first up, we have Angela Cialana.
What's up, everybody?
It's good to have you. Second up is Thomas Sanjurjo.
It's good to be here.
And third and finally this evening, we have Mike Creevy.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Pretty darn well. Before we jump quite into the episode at hand, I just wanted to kind of get your guys' thoughts and opinions on something super important that happened yesterday. We've kind of already been chatting about this a little bit, but yesterday was October 10th, 2020, and it was the beatification of Carlo Acutis, who was a 15-year-old. I guess you'd say he's Italian. I guess he was born in London, but very quickly after a couple months was moved to Milan with his family. But he loved the Lord, so he's declared a blessed now. He was a tech whiz, so he's kind of a pseudo patron for what we do.
Yes.
He programmed websites. He was a gamer. But most of all, he loved the Lord and he loved the Eucharist. So he actually created a website that catalogs the Eucharistic miracles around the world. But also just, I think, Angela, you found he had created like a Star Wars themed little video, which was really cool to pull up and see.
Yeah, so I don't know, maybe we can share that link in the show notes. But once I heard that he liked Pokemon and he liked movies and comics, I was like, dude, I have to Google this. I was like, Carlo Acutis, Star Wars. And it came up that he was a Star Wars fan and that he made this fun little video, edited this video together. It's actually really impressive for somebody his age. It has the John Williams music in there and everything. So yeah, cool. It's just neat to know that somebody in heaven is, also a Star Wars fan and just, I feel a kinship.
I just discovered that his birthday was May 3rd. He was so close.
So close. So close.
Maybe God held that back because that would have just been too much. But yeah, we got to stay humble.
It's funny. It's. I love the fact that, you can take your faith and you don't have to check your nerdiness at the door. You can bring all of that stuff in. And I was just telling Father before we started the show that we take our 11-year-olds to Hogwarts, to Universal, to kind of experience the whole Hogwarts thing. And I took my freshly minted 11-year-old yesterday, and we did this whole day thing. And during the day, I was really wanting to connect with him and have a good faith talk, and it just didn't happen. So finally, into the night, we're on the Hogwarts ride, and he brings up the fact that he wants to talk about the houses. And so we talk about, he got clocked into the Slytherin house, and so he's worried about being a bad guy. And we had this long discussion about, why that's not necessarily true. We all have these kind of natures that tend this way, but that, it's all about the choices that you make. And that turned into a discussion about the disciples and which house they would be in. And so we were placing all the disciples into houses. And it turned into a great day with a great talk right at the end, and all about the nerdiness. And, I was hoping that it would coalesce, and it almost didn't. But then right at the end, it just, God saved it and kind of stepped into that.
what I appreciate about all of this is that God doesn't want us to deny our humanity. And so to have a saint like Carlo is just, it's super helpful for young people today to have someone to relate to, because often you look at the saints and it's like, oh my gosh, they were so holy and pious. Or you look at Saint Therese, who had her own faults, but like, oh my gosh, she was so darn holy, and I'm so not, in comparison. But to have him and to recognize that, like, God uses our humanity. Like, he became one of us in all things but sin. So that says that all the things that we like and enjoy and have fun with, none of that is outside of God's providence and his desire for us, which is kind of the whole point of all of the podcasts that we do on SQPN, this bridging of pop culture and the Catholic faith, which is really super cool. One of the things that I did when I stepped in as pastor here at St. Lawrence O'Toole was in the bulletin. I had like this blurb of, this is who I am and this is kind of where I came from and, a little bit of my backstory. But I also included in there that I was a geek and that I loved Star Wars. And you would be probably not surprised by how much people responded to that. Mm-hmm. I have masks made by parishioners that are Star Wars themed that I wear at Mass, and like I can wear just about one every day of the week. A different parishioner brought me, Baby Yoda cereal, and so it's really cool to be able to connect to people on that way, and to know that that's, again, not outside of God's providence and realm. So
I'm laughing, by the way, here. I'm looking on his on the YouTube page, YouTube page, on the Wikipedia page, and it says attributes: laptop, rosary, blessed sacrament. And I'm laughing. Nice. It's almost like video game language. You know what I mean? Like your power ups or like your special things. Yeah, just like what's it? His in his toolkit: laptop, rosary, blessed sacrament. That's like the perfect patron saint for like every kid born, after like 1990.
Yeah.
One of the things that he did that I found really inspiring too was that, like, he was a gamer, but he specifically limited his gaming to an hour a week as a spiritual discipline, which I think is it's probably not something that many people can do, but I found that very impressive. I need to limit like my Facebook time to an hour a week. Oh, that would be super helpful. So
I think he's definitely a show patron for us, huh?
Yeah, right.
I think so.
I think kind of we'll see if Dom makes it official, but I think unofficially we can totally claim him.
Nice.
So, but with that, go look him up. Blessed Carlo Acutis, and which means that he's actually in heaven. He's a saint who can intercede for us. So, which is super cool. With that, well, let's turn to our episode at hand and let's talk about the finale of Rebels. As always, you guys ready? What was your impressions of these? It's a 40-minute long episode, but what was your impression of the finale?
I didn't care for it. I'm just kidding. No, I loved it. Like, where do you start?
Yeah.
Well, I think probably up to the point that this came out, this was probably the best like Star Wars finale, or maybe the most satisfying that I remember seeing. I mean, obviously, Return of the Jedi is like my favorite Star Wars movie technically, but I think there was just something uniquely satisfying about this particular finale. And we'll go into all the different reasons, but I loved how it did connect to the different lore, the different media in Star Wars, and it also left us wanting more at the same time. And so there was the spiritual elements, there was the battle elements, great character moments, character development. So, and the music was awesome. Yeah. I think it just had all the elements that make a great finale.
Really surprising, like sci fantasy trope to, that ending and the ending of the battle was just kind of like a surprise, but also made complete sense. And I think if I had one complaint, it would be that there wasn't enough Chopper. Like Chopper was wildly underutilized in the finale.
Yeah,
and he was knocked out for a good
couple
minutes there at least. Yeah, no, it was just it was great. It was very satisfying, and as always, I can't help but of course be thinking about connections to other stuff, and with all the Mandalorian hype and everything coming up, it's just I hadn't really watched this full episode since. Well, I think I may have watched it since the Mandalorian season 1 first came out, but I don't think I had seen it since the speculation had really kind of geared up about Mandalorian season 2 and all the potential connections here. And I don't know, I just couldn't help but think your timeline at the end of this episode is all over that, and they specifically set themselves up for some things to be resolved one way or the other. So I can't imagine they would just leave that loose end or those loose ends. So yeah, I loved it on its own, and then also for the potential connections outside of it that I think they can do a lot with.
I'm hoping we get a live action Grand Admiral Thrawn.
Yeah,
oh man,
that's my main hope.
But we'll see. Yeah, I would just kind of echo what you guys said. I loved how there was a I mean, it was a finale, so there's definitely kind of the conclusion of the story, and it's all built upon the family theme and the relationships between the characters, which is so key. But I also loved that I found a distinct parallel between Ezra and Anakin. So Anakin in Revenge of the Sith, in encountering Palpatine and being manipulated, and then Ezra and Palpatine in this particular episode, and how both of them parallel each other, and one chooses one way and one chooses the other way. And so there was kind of a Revenge of the Sith parallel, but also Return of the Jedi parallel, if you will, for kind of the bigger finale, which I thought was really fun to kind of see play out. And it answers the question of why didn't we see Ezra in the original trilogy, which was they had to explain that somehow. And I'm glad that he's not dead.
It's always a good thing.
Thrawn too. I'm glad both of them are unknown, but still alive. So to jump into the recap, the episode starts off immediately where the previous episode kind of left, and we see Ezra holding a hollow of his family, and I think that again kind of keys back to that family theme, and Ezra, he's grown so much, which I really love to see that. And he says that he's afraid, but he's not afraid for himself. He's afraid for his friends and his family, and everything that he's doing began and ended with them, his family, as he's looking at this hollow, which was a succinct summary of kind of Ezra's personality, his character, which was cool. Hera comes and kind of pulls him away from that, and we swap to Governor Price, who's being brought out, who was captured in the previous episode, and her and Callus kind of have this little dialogue between the two of them, and I thought it was really interesting what Callus said, because Price is telling him, that he's betraying the Empire, and Callus says to her, "The day I betrayed your empire, Governor, was the day I finally stopped betraying myself." And I just found that to be a very pointed comment, because it's just something that we all, I think, could learn from, is we often kind of put blinders on and aren't true to ourselves, or we try to, be someone that we're not in order to fit in or to feel part of something greater. And it's important to not betray ourselves, not betray the person that God made us to be.
And that's such a succinct kind of wrapping up of the Star Wars theme as a whole, right? The stormtroopers are all the same. They all, like, you can even look at moments where you see a stormtrooper and Leia sees Luke in the stormtrooper garb and says, "Aren't you a little short to be a stormtrooper?" And it's like wow, how homogenous all is this group, that it's all exactly the same. And you always see the main characters without masks. All the rebels always have their faces exposed. They're visible to the world. They show who they are. Even though if you were talking about this in real life, that might be the group that you would think would be more likely to kind of be the terrorist group with their faces covered, trying to hide who they are.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Even the producers of the show talk about how they, in the behind the scenes stuff, how they change the main characters' looks each season to sort of demonstrate their character growth as well as their personal development. And Callus is one of those characters. You kind of see that, like you were saying, Thomas, the Imperial characters sort of look the same. Even Governor Price, she doesn't wear a mask. She wears a uniform, but she looks the same throughout the whole, series that we see her. But Callus obviously has a huge sort of conversion and change in his life. And he looks totally different, when he's with the rebellion versus when he's with the Empire. And I think he's like one of my favorite characters in Rebels. Because of what he kind of represents, acknowledging that your former way of life was not the correct path, and having the humility to choose differently and to reconcile with your enemy. And, I think that he's a really cool character.
It was pointed out on a commentary somewhere, just like even the relationship between him and Zeb, like they started off as mortal enemies. With even Callus being at least kind of thinking that he was complicit in the genocide of the Lasat race.
Right.
And then at the end of this episode, he is brought to their home world and is able to see that they have survived. And just seeing Zeb and Callus as friends is awesome.
It's not quite the same, but it's a little reminiscent. I mean, it's not quite the same in terms of where they started out, because they were far more, like you said, enemies. But I couldn't help but think a little of Legolas and Gimli, in terms of at least hostility. But much more of that obviously in this. But same kind of satisfying. Like it wasn't hard to believe. Like there's this. They go through this thing together, and it was just a really fun arc with the two of them.
So I thought you were going to say Han and Chewie when you were setting that up.
No, they were enemies, I guess, technically.
Yeah, like we saw in Solo, they were.
As we found out, he thought he was going to be eaten. That was an interesting touch.
It's a Wookiee, man. You got to be afraid of the Wookiees.
But it just points out the ability to grow as persons. That even if we run into someone and there's, antagonistic feelings, I mean, you can work through that and actually become really, really good friends, even in the midst of that. And, good fiction reflects real life. So, so that's really cool to see kind of portrayed through all those characters.
And I think it's especially important to remember that it's through work, like this strenuous work together, that they are able to become battle brothers in this case. But and I think a lot of people miss the fact that you can do just as much of that growing together in volunteer work, because you see these trenches and you work so hard and you pour so much of yourself into it that the people that are with you when you do that, they become lifelong friends. They become so important to you that they're family members.
And that makes me think of it also sort of depends on like the goal. That, I mean, if like Zeb and Callus Callus kind of got into recognizing the evil of the Empire and wanting to do good. So their goal was to liberate and to free and to bring peace to the galaxy, a noble cause, versus, two criminals who are in it for themselves and their goal is not as noble. That naturally leads to a destruction of the friendship, versus like two people who are striving for holiness that are standing together in the battle of the world. That can draw two people together in a way that, if you're just climbing the career ladder together, it's not the same.
It's the power of virtue versus vice.
Yeah.
Like vice will destroy and virtue will unite.
And I was reminded of the because the whole crew too, because there's others we'll get to later, but with Vizago and Hondo and like all these folks who don't really seem to fit. If there were no Empire, these guys wouldn't necessarily be coming together. And I couldn't help but think of was it C.S. Lewis? I think had the line somewhere about like when there's a madman at the door, warring brothers will reconcile. Like that idea of like, hey, no, this is more important. You know, like we've got our squabbles, you know, and maybe they're important and we have to work on them too. And, you know, we of course see some of that in the wake of the destruction of the Empire and the whole lead up to the sequel trilogy too. Like we learned that everybody wasn't just friends then afterwards either. Like the war kind of continues where we still have these conflicts between each other. But, you know, how long can we really kind of stretch that out and kind of hopefully reconcile these differences, you know, so they're not just waiting there as soon as this immediate threat's gone.
All good points. So Callus is here to help, and they coerce Governor Price to work with them at this point, and Ezra uses the Lothwolves to coerce her into making sure she you know helps them and doesn't want to be eaten by the Lothwolf. So she agrees to give them the victory codes and help the rebels infiltrate the capital. And then they all ship off to the capital to infiltrate the dome with a plan to liberate Lothal. On the way there was a couple key dialogue moments that I want to bring up. And one of them is totally Rex. They were talking about the plan. And Rex says, in my experience, when it comes to Jedi, the worse the plan, the better the result.
Yeah. I don't know if Rex is a great one to rely on experience, though, because I mean, you're talking about Anakin there.
True, but he's had experience with Kanan and Ezra, and you know,
yeah, that's true too.
So, but then there's a really cool moment between Ezra and Sabine, and Ezra kind of makes the point to tell Sabine that he says, "I know I can always count on you." And they really kind of put emphasis on this, not just kind of a passing comment, but that kind of came up later on in the episode and at the end where Sabine sort of recognizes that that was maybe an allusion to her going to find him in the unknown regions.
That was one of those real like brother and sister moments.
Yeah.
Wasn't it, though?
Well, and that's exactly what I was going to bring up is that was a key reflection of their brother-sister relationship. And I want to say it was in I think they mentioned it perhaps in the Rebels Recon. Just the fact that like Ezra and Sabine, they didn't need to have a romantic relationship for this to work.
Right.
Their relationship as brother and sister was so incredibly powerful, just the way that it was. And I was really thankful for that because, you know, just because a guy and a girl are friends does not mean that it has to be romantic. I have plenty of friends who are girls, and you know, there's no romantic interest at all there, but there's still an authentic friendship, which is so good and so necessary. They're kind of talking about the plan. They are going to land at the command center and launch the dome, and surprise, surprise, that entire dome is actually a ship, and that can be like jettisoned from the planet. Or I mean, I guess the idea was that the Empire could land one of these things on a planet that they were going to occupy, and they already had a pre-made capital city dome ready to go. They didn't have to build any infrastructure for it. So
it actually makes sense if you think about it in terms of like the Death Star, right? The Death Star is like the next evolution of that, where it
looks like half a Death Star.
That's pretty much what it is. It's like half a Death Star. It's the full capability of the Legion or whatever rank and file it is, and then they just land it and kind of deploy from there. Mm-hmm. And it totally fits with all the video game concept that you go with, like, right, where you go into conquer an area and you just land your massive base where you start building all of your units from, and there you go.
I couldn't help but laugh, though, because I was thinking, like, just, I don't know, I was on this geometry bent, because I couldn't help but think, I was like, okay, here's this thing, looking at this dome, and then I'm thinking of, like, the Stargate pyramid thing, and then, like, I'm like, and if you get the Borg cube in there, you know, pretty much got all of our bases covered for different shapes that really seem to work.
It's like a Dali painting.
Yeah. But I thought the dome was the coolest. I don't know. It looked neat.
Yeah. No, Thomas, I think you raised a really good point. I've been playing Halo Wars with my brother, and that's like a real-time strategy game. So same sort of thing. Like the base gets built, and then that's just where everything is built and comes from, and you just kind of take over all the enemies in the area. The plan is to launch it and to blow it up. And first of all, they want to bring all the Imperials onto the dome and then blow it up with all of them on it. So first they got to get there, and so they land and attempt to infiltrate the dome. They charade out as if Price has them prisoners, and we have the kind of fun infiltration scene. And yeah, a lot of just, this is so Rebels.
The pigs flying was just fantastic. That was my favorite part. Right?
I thought of that line like 5 or 6 times this week, and it makes me giggle like every single time.
Yep.
And like if anyone said it but him for some, I just feel like Hondo saying it's like it's got to be him.
Just the way he said it too is like in such awe. Like they can fly.
But even
I also liked his preceding. Hey, purple guy,
yep.
Get in position.
Yep.
It's like...
Hondo's a character that I think we'll come back to, but I even that it's fun to see the relationship between Hondo and Melch. You know, so but we'll get back to that because there's more to that later. Say they do infiltrate the command center using Melch as the pig who can fly as a distraction. And they recognize that they can't defeat all of Price's troops, and they don't want to. Instead, they want to utilize Protocol 13. And it's apparently the Empire's new order that will immediately recall all the personnel to the base for full evacuation. That's when they will then try to launch it, and it's goodbye to the Empire on Lothal. And of course, things don't go exactly as planned. We shift back out to the plains of Lothal, where Wolf, Vizago, and Mart Martin are informed of the rebels' progress and are standing by. And Matt says that, or Mart, is it Mart or Matt?
It's Mart.
Mart. It's Mart. Wrote it wrong in my notes. So Mart says that Ezra gave him a special mission, but before anything happens, they're attacked by Rook. And I put in my notes, the fall didn't kill him.
Of course not.
Right. So
stop throwing people down pits.
Never works.
Is it? Correct me if I'm wrong, somebody. I don't want to go too. Funny enough, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole here. But and I didn't intend that. But is Mace Windu the only one who supposedly died from that? Like, because I'm trying to think. I was thinking the other day. I have to sit down and like write it out, but I can't think. Like everyone who gets thrown down a pit doesn't die now, including
I'm sure
the Emperor.
there's other less notable pits that have been used to dispose of characters in various different series that we're just not remembering.
That fall, right? There's plenty of stormtroopers that Wilhelm scream their way off the edge of something.
He might be the only.
The key. If they do the Wilhelm scream,
you got to do the Wilhelm scream. There it is. Yeah. That's what.
Well,
there was even the Jedi in Attack of the Clones that jumps up and they blast him Jango Fett gets him and he just falls not nearly as far and just lands and he's but he got shot. So I don't know what the rule is. So
there must be an explosion involved in the fall, right?
And Mace Windu was electrocuted. So I mean, there's all kinds of
But did he die?
Well, I know now everybody is like there's like that whole culture on online with that too. Like he's coming back. I'm like, oh gosh,
really?
Well, Samuel Jackson's ageless, so you might as well just throw out anything.
Some people are like, well, maybe he'll be in the Kenobi series. I'm like, don't do it. I'd love to see him too, but that
would be so random.
I think that's a bridge too far.
Yeah,
they need to cap. They got, because I don't know if you guys remember in the expanded universe era, George Lucas finally said, okay, look, you've got to stop with the Jedi survived Order 66. Or it's like, what was Order 66 even for, right? So I hope that they hit that cap a little earlier with the new universe that they've started here.
Yeah. So anyway, so Rook didn't die, as it's very clear, and he manages to knock all of Mart, Vizago, and Wolf out. But before he can kill any of them, Lothwolf comes and chases him back and forces Rook to retreat. At which point he informs Grand Admiral Thrawn that the rebels captured Price and that they've infiltrated the Imperial headquarters. And Thrawn is not at all surprised. He expected Governor Price to fail, but not so completely. So apparently Price missed the bar that even Thrawn had lowered for her. And poor Price. But anyway, so Thrawn isn't worried at all, but he does task Rook with shutting down the shield generators over the city before the rebels can lock down the dome, which is important in the plot that follows. Back in the command center, Callus does his best to implement Protocol 13. They have to get Ryder to imitate Colonel Yularen's voice and kind of talk his way through confirming the order, which was kind of fun to see that kind of play out.
Which isn't surprising. Clancy Brown doing it, of course, isn't surprising. But, you know, it's funny that like his character is as good at voices as he is, right?
Yeah, but even like the hangar officer was skeptical. So, you know,
yeah.
But he, you know, kind of uses intimidation and causes him to go ahead with the order. And so that causes all the Imperial units to move back to the dome. And Rook also comes back into the dome at that point as well. And it's at this point that Thrawn finally arrives on the scene. The crew was attempting to start the launch, but they had to cancel it because otherwise it would crash into the Star Destroyer and the debris would kill innocent people and destroy the entire city potentially. So they stopped the launch, and Thrawn and Ezra have a conversation, and Ezra is acting confident and tells Thrawn that he's failed.
Thrawn is a chess player. He knows how to turn the table really, really well.
Sent chills up my spine.
I appreciated that so much because I know the Thrawn from the books. And so there had to be a way that he was defeated in this, but like completely unexpected. And the way that the finale plays out, I think, pays homage to Thrawn, that this was a chess piece that he could not expect coming his way. But this particular encounter with Ezra, he does expect, and he's completely ready for it.
Something I put in my notes at this point is that everything gets far worse before it can get better. Mm-hmm. And I just, you know, it's like that happens in every story, but these days it was very comforting to remember things have to get worse before they get better.
And man, seeing those Star Destroyers, it's intimidating. Like thinking about a ship that size, you know, we talk about the people falling down holes and it not mattering in Star Wars. Gravity just doesn't matter in Star Wars, right? You see these enormous ships, the size of a city themselves, and several of them like floating above your city. And then Thrawn not caring about the people on the ground, knowing that he's not even intimidating the people in the city. He's just making a point to Ezra. You have not won. This is my victory here.
I'm gonna,
and then he starts bombing.
I think his motivation is not quite so heartless as that. But again, this is totally me, like knowing Thrawn from the books, that he's such a strategist that I think he had to do this in order to, you know, make his point known, make his power known. I guess I give Thrawn a little bit more soul maybe than is seen in Rebels. I don't think he would just needlessly kill.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. With that.
Yeah. I don't disagree with you on that. Definitely. Yeah. I think that this is it's a strategic move to assert dominance, right? And there's nothing lost in that. Like, and he even mentions, I think, that he doesn't want to have to do this, but he obviously has to now.
He mentions later.
He knows.
Yep. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say he knows Ezra's weak point and that how much he cares about Lothal, and he wants Ezra to get on the ship. On the Star Destroyer. So he's got to compel him to, you know, again, assert his dominance and make it look like you have no choice but to come meet with me and do exactly what I want.
Later on in the episode, he does make the point that he didn't want to destroy Lothal, but it's inevitable now, I think is how he kind of frames it. I feel sort of torn because I want to defend Thrawn so bad because I love him as a character, and especially the books where he's more the protagonist than the antagonist.
Yeah.
So, but
I think the thing you see here, the one thing that you do see here is that he is not the one that gets caught monologuing, right? Like he does not monologue at all. He says, look, I know you're not going to take my word for it, so I'm just going to do this now and show you that you have to get on this Star Destroyer.
Yep.
And it's not because he wants Ezra to come meet him. It's because he answers to somebody else. Mm-hmm. And that's the only reason he's bringing Ezra on. It's not because he wants to do this grandstanding thing. He's like, the Emperor wants you here, so get up here.
He just lets him go through his whole speech. He's like, are you quite finished? It's like, right? And you just see Ezra's face just sinks. Like, what? Like that's the best I had.
Like, yeah. And that's what makes Thrawn such a good villain, is that like he's not afraid to retreat if it's necessary and militaristically appropriate. He's not going to just, wastelessly lose his crew and his ships out of some prideful sort of idea, but rather he is so calculated that he's scarily cool in how he approaches all of this. And then so he does open fire on the city, destroying people and buildings. And Thomas, you might feel similarly to me in this. I don't know if Angela or Mike, you've played Knights of the Old Republic.
Yeah,
but in
time ago,
in the very kind of the opening of that video game, at the end of the first chapter, the entire city and I think planet is destroyed by the Sith, who bombard the planet with their laser beams, and it's very devastating in the video game. To like see it happen here on Lothal, it was like, oh no, this is going to be bad, and it kind of aided in my fear of the city after playing that.
I was just going back and double checking because his character, I was pretty sure I was right on this, and I'm with this might have come up before when we talked about some of his stuff like a long time ago, but I know Timothy Zahn, I was just verifying here, was describing, among others, who in the first place were kind of inspirations for this character. He's basically sort of an amalgamation of Rommel and Hannibal and Robert E. Lee and
Sherlock Holmes.
Sherlock Holmes, yep. Alexander the Great. And it's interesting because somehow he, just all the like Sun Tzu, like all the Art of War stuff, like there's just this hodge. It's interesting. He doesn't become just this unbelievable hodgepodge. He somehow fits so perfectly in the Star Wars universe. Because I've been reading tons of these books now. Like I'm doing all the audiobooks thing, as I told you guys. I've backed my addiction off a little bit. But sometimes, and I love them all, but sometimes it's just too, and some people bring this criticism up with some of the movies too. Sometimes it's just too Earth-like, but it's like, but I don't know. The main character's name in the first movie is Luke. So, but there's just always that, like, when do you cross that line, and when are you still on the right side of it kind of thing? And somehow he's always totally in that universe. He's just such an incredible character to combine all those specific influences, but to also keep him, pure in a sense,
And to be such a perfect strategist, you would have to be, you would have to have this machine backing you, right? You'd have to have this war machine that just to rise in the ranks that way. It would have
with
to
the
be
galaxy
cold.
that big too, and the conflict that big. He has to be up to that
exactly.
level.
It's just cold, calculating, not concerned about not concerned beyond the importance of what he's doing.
Right.
The mission, what the consequences are of where he is.
But I think it also helps that he's Chiss, so he is naturally he's humanoid, but he's not a human. So I mean, it kind of already separates him off from all the human Imperials. But also, if you read Chaos Rising, which is the new Timothy Zahn book, you hear or you read about Thrawn's rise through the ranks in the Chiss Ascendancy. But even in the Chiss Ascendancy, he's an oddball. He is super brilliant in terms of strategy and military, which that's what kind of causes him to rise through the ranks. But it's also cool too, because he's not at all perfect. And in the political sphere, he is incredibly lacking and can't quite figure it out. So he's like a supervillain, but he's also, he's not perfect, which helps balance the character, because you can't have someone who's just all powerful and almighty. And
and he's never going to be part of there. What's interesting to me is like I can't quite see him and like Moff Gideon getting along.
Mm-hmm.
You know, exactly. And some of those other Moffs who pop up in the books and stuff where there is that, they might be a great strategist, military, you know, even Tarkin, you know, because he has some, you know, run-ins with Tarkin in some of the books too, where it's just, that's not his world, you know, and it's just very interesting. He's never really part of that.
He's not an administrator. He's a strategist.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Like he is all about the battle and the chess game. And if this is something that interests you, anybody who's listening or any of you guys, there is a fantastic YouTuber that goes by the name of Eckert's Ladder, and he talks about strategy, like space strategy, and how Star Wars nails it in some instances and how it completely misses the ball in other instances. And so he's got really great, like he runs through these, the books and like the different conflicts that occur in the books and the shows. And he talks about why they might have chosen the strategies that they did and what they could have done differently to possibly win. And, you know, has these really cool, 4D graphics for it and everything. So definitely recommend you check it out. It's Eckert's Ladder on YouTube. Really cool battle reviews if you're nerdy like me and love this space kind of stuff. Definitely.
I just subscribed.
I think we all kind of fit that camp of nerdiness.
Oh, definitely.
So Thrawn, being the strategist that he is, though, knows that this is exactly what he needs to do to get Ezra to surrender, which Ezra, he does. He hands off his lightsaber to Chopper and plans to go to the Star Destroyer. And we have a very touching moment where Hera tries to tell him that there must be another way, and she tries to kind of, stop him from going. And again, we have the Sabine and Ezra kind of bond moment where Sabine knows that Ezra has to go, and Ezra recognizes it, and so Sabine pulls the attention of everyone away from Ezra as they're trying to come up with a plan to start the shield generator up, and allows Ezra to slip away without having to justify his actions. Ezra heads up to the Star Destroyer, and meanwhile, stormtroopers are coming to lay siege to the command center where all the rest of the crew is. When Ezra gets up to the Star Destroyer, we have a really cool dialogue between Thrawn and Ezra again. And so Thrawn he's doing a little bit of kind of prideful monologuing. He points out to Ezra that he's predictable, and rather than choose to let his people die, he chose to be a Jedi. And so that's how Thrawn knew that he was gonna come up there. He says that Jedi always choose what they believe to be morally correct, even if it isn't the most strategic, which I sort of felt like that was a good analogy for my Christian life.
I think it's knowing. I go back to the chess analogy because the chess analogy is so good here. It's the difference between a chess player who wants to protect all of their pieces and a chess player who wants to make the lines to win, right? And sometimes you put a piece out there to sacrifice it just to make that better choice of that better positioning for yourself, and it's hard. It's really hard to jump that moment in chess. And so if it's hard to jump that moment in chess where it's just about stupid pieces on a board, right? To do it as a strategist in war is really complex, where you have all of these moving pieces that are, if not just monetarily valuable, they're actual human life that you're sacrificing for whatever your cause is. But if you're going to win the battle, occasionally that is the choice that you have to make. And, I hate the eggs and omelets analogy, but sometimes that's the way that war goes. And that's the point he's trying to make, is like, sometimes you have to sacrifice what is morally right in order to win the battle. And it comes back to that question of, do the ends justify the means? And where do we draw that line? Yep. And, we go back to this whole just war thing, and, we could endlessly circle that question, but it's a really cool moment to see those two things juxtaposed.
I think, maybe you guys can correct me, but it seems like in this series they portray Thrawn as an amoral character. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
That he doesn't have morals. Even when he says what they believe to be moral, it's like, oh, you guys have your little morals. That's cute. They serve no purpose for me.
I was just going to say, I think in the show that is very exactly how he's presented. Yeah. Because in a show like Rebels, they're spending more time with Ezra and the family than with getting into kind of the mind of Thrawn. But if you read the books, again, I'll make a plug for them. They are fantastic. He definitely has a moral center, you know, and it may not be the same morality that the Jedi have, because I think Thrawn will do things like the ends justify the means, versus Ezra, you know, and the Jedi who would say, you know, sacrificing a life is never worth whatever end result you're going for.
And well, that's to my knowledge, I don't think the show even hints at the, of course, whole dilemma from the books about his sort of split loyalties. Because you know, my read on it I haven't read the new ones yet because of my whole stupid I didn't reserve it in enough time thing, which I've gone over on previous episodes. But it's only 6 weeks now till I can get it.
Oh well, hey, yeah.
Although now that I think
wish I could just send you my copy, but
well, I might just go, because the thing is, I'm sure I'll love it. I might just buy it, but I mean, I've gotten a lot of them for free through the library. I could probably afford to get one of them. But I think I know in the trilogy Zahn did just a few years ago. I know they really explored that. Was it the third one? I think. Yeah, I think it was the third one.
Treason,
where it's really yeah. So in Treason, they really explored that a lot with him, and you know, I mean, it's like he's pretty devoted to the Chiss ascendancy, and this is like a real long term. Like, there's no expiration date on this whole Empire thing. Like, he's basically doing all of this because it seems to me like that's the most strategic way, you know, to make sure that he has this kind of long-term play, or can kind of keep an eye on the frontiers from their perspective, because they're way out in a different part of space and everything. So, but yeah, I mean, you don't get any of that in the show. He's just an admiral, and he looks different than the other ones, and
right,
you know. So I think you do miss something to some extent. Again, you don't need it,
right?
But it does make his character seem much less complicated, you know.
I think it's sort of, to kind of get back to the dialogue that they have, I think portraying Thrawn in the way that they do serves a greater purpose for a motif in the series, which is that, you know, Ezra tells Thrawn the Force isn't a weapon. And to me, when I hear that, I think about, you know, that ancient verse in scripture that God's ways are far above our ways. And this concept that, you know, Thrawn kind of typifies the ultimate conqueror, and he sees the Force as, you know, a means to gain power. And, you know, that in our galaxy, God and religion and spirituality are still weaponized. Like, they're still used as sort of a tool to gain power. And I think, you know, Ezra also says, you think you can take whatever you want, things you didn't make, didn't earn, things you don't even understand. And to kind of get to the heart of what I'm saying here is that he is sort of, Ezra's representing this native of Lothal who is standing up against this conqueror, you know, a potential conqueror of Lothal. And that is a recurrent motif in Star Wars, the motif of the natives versus the conquerors. And, you know, George Lucas really loved that theme. And I think also with Thrawn's use of art and artifacts, we see that it's, you know, merely for strategic purposes. And Ezra is kind of saying, like, you don't understand these things. Thrawn is trying to use everything on a sort of artificial or superficial level. But, you know, as we know, it's sort of like when you study theology, it's like the insider's perspective versus an outsider's perspective. If you're not involved in the spirituality and in the religion, the religious practice, and you don't have that background, there's no way you can appreciate the piece of art, the artifact, whatever it is. So I think, George Lucas, he's huge into art. He's huge into artifacts. That's his thing. And I think that ultimately that was a reason why they have Thrawn portrayed in sort of a simplistic manner in Rebels.
I would just like to add, I think you're making a very good distinction. It's like the distinction of, I think Thrawn understands art, but I don't think he feels art. Or in terms of like Catholic spirituality, it's like he knows about Jesus, but he doesn't know Jesus.
It's carrying a rosary for protection, but not praying the rosary.
Yeah,
right? Like not
having a relationship
connection
with Mary. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the distinction I always use with the kids when I'm teaching them. I'm teaching an Old Testament course right now, and I was trying to give them some principles of Catholic biblical, study and reading and everything early on, and we really spent some time on the analogy of a family photo album with Scripture. And that you can have somebody who could sit there and study that thing day in, day out, and know more about it than you in one way. Like what everybody's wearing and what that kind of like architecture is, like every little detail, but they're not part of the family and you are, and so there's just a different experience of, when it's your story, and it actually means something to you. It has to do with where you came from. The other person may be able to quote chapter and verse and you may not be able to, but it's just a different experience of that relationship that you've made a decision to kind of embrace this. And to them, it's just sort of, for whatever reason, for study, for strategy, for, it's a means to an end when it really kind of is your end.
Yeah. And I think for Thrawn, that's ultimately his downfall. Like he knows about Sabine because of her art. He knows about Hera. Right. He knows about, the rebels, but he doesn't know the rebels. So like how Ezra acts catches him off guard, and that's why he loses. Back on the Thal, we have Martin and Wolf and Vizago getting woken up by a Lothwolf, and Mart says that he's been given a special mission by Ezra. This is that totally Ezra Bridger kind of plan that Thrawn couldn't account for. So they head off and head out and start sending out a signal beacon on frequency 0. And of course, Wolf is confused and doesn't know what that's for. And Mart, all he says is that they are not contacting a who, but a what, and kind of leaves it at that. And we see that come into play later. Back in the command center, we have the crew distracting the stormtroopers to get out to be able to go take back the shield generators and get them turned online. And Hera and Sabine are really hoping that Ezra knows what he's doing. We then get to perhaps the key of the whole episode, if you will. It's the Thrawn takes Ezra to the Emperor, and that's kind of the heart of this whole episode. Because the Emperor is of course wanting to see Ezra and to use Ezra, and Thrawn has been tasked to bring him to the Emperor. And so he brings him to the Jedi Temple on the Star Destroyer, which was taken from the planet and reconstructed. Can't imagine the price of hiring the movers for that.
They built a Death Star. Who cares what the price for moving the temple was, right?
Well, part of me was like, well, if you were to like take the temple apart and rebuild it, like, would it lose its, apparently it doesn't lose its like mystical powers, but part of me would be like, well, maybe should have been tied to the planet and the place.
There was something funky about that too. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Or perhaps maybe this is what's going on, is that the Emperor was just using his own.
It was a ruse.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that actually makes more sense.
That's kind of where that's the feeling I walked away with it, was that this the whole thing was a ruse, right?
Right. Well, and it all starts off with the Emperor appearing as he did. He's all dressed in white. He's appearing like he did in the prequels. He's warm. He's charming. He's inviting. He's fatherly. And he's and it's all to manipulate Ezra. And that's, again, like what I was mentioning earlier, that I was seeing the parallels with the Emperor and Anakin. Same sort of thing. Manipulation and, appearing to care and to be fatherly to both of them.
Were there any other episodes where you had Ian McDiarmid do the voice? I think in the World Between Worlds, I think. Which was the same season,
yes,
right?
Yes.
But I don't think before...
I think before it was a different voice actor.
Okay.
In fact, I want to say Sam Witwer was the voice of the Emperor in previous episodes.
Because I know they had different people do his voice in the Clone Wars. There was a couple. I think Tim Curry did it at one point. There were
wow,
a few people.
That sounds awesome.
But and they were close. But I mean, nobody's voice sounds quite like his. When it's him, it's like, like I get a chill. It's funny because he seems like such a sweet guy.
I've met him.
That character is. Oh, have you?
Yeah, and he is the nicest guy ever.
Oh my gosh! I saw something where he was saying, like, everyone was saying we love you, and he's like, I don't know what. He's like, you shouldn't. He's like, my character's horrible. I was like, he's a terrible person.
Yeah.
The thing that interested me about this one is this kind of like took me out of just the moment where he's trying to corrupt Ezra, and it made me wonder, is this what he's done with all of the Inquisitors? Like, has he taken each of the Inquisitors and honed in on what it was that was the deepest? Like is this a strategy? 'Cause this almost seems lazy, honestly. Like if you watch this, it's like this one thing about Ezra, and and you think you're just going to earn it like that. That's it. Just it's done, and it worked with Anakin because he had a long time to build Anakin up to that point. Yep. Right. But it seems so lazy with Ezra, where it's just like, let's take you in and like give you this desire of your heart, which is so far fetched, honestly. Even at this point, you're kind of like, oh gosh, okay, that's a bridge too far. Seriously, guy. And so I wonder if this is like what he's been doing with the Inquisitors, is like just systematically taking them and picking their thing that would push them over the edge. And that's how he's gotten them all to that point. He raises them to be the way they are, but then takes that moment, and instead of instilling the Jedi in them, like the moral imperative to save the universe, he instills that selfishness that is the dark side of the Force.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think the Emperor was just pressed for time with this particular encounter.
Right.
This was like the Hail Mary shot for him that didn't pan out.
We're going to try it. We're going to try this.
But on the flip side, I mean, the Emperor is a master manipulator. So he definitely, it wouldn't have been just like a complete shot in the dark. He's known people and human nature well enough to know what buttons to push, and, orchestrating the entire Clone Wars. And I mean, everything. He probably thought his chances of success in getting Ezra to fall were, an acceptable risk.
Well, and he always, I mean, one of the creepiest things with him always for me every time I watch it is the fight with Mace Windu. And he's so like, just, like, I'm too weak. And, and like, he's like begging for his life, and he's this poor, innocent, injured dude. And the moment he blasts him out the window, he just hops right up. He's not even like out of breath. And it's like, oh, okay. Like, he just rebounds, and he's horribly disfigured for the rest of his life. But he's just like, all right, now where's that Order 66 stuff? And it's like, oh, okay.
But he even uses his disfigurement to further his cause.
Right.
Yeah.
They feel sorry for him. Yeah.
Right.
Can I kind of get into the temptation part?
Yes, please.
Because I wanted to talk about that. So obviously, like the Emperor tempts Ezra into, now that he has the knowledge that, hey, time is sort of like you can jump into different time zones now, kind of like that we saw it in the previous episodes, and so he sort of tempts Ezra into this idea that he can go and rejoin his family, which is very creepy. I was thinking, like, exactly what you were saying, Thomas, like, this is not real. He's probably just going to jump into some weird black hole, and like that was kind of the Emperor's plan. And Ezra really looks like he's going to give in for a second, but he ends up saying, Mom and Dad, you'll always be a part of me, but I have to let you go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think, first of all, at the beginning of the episode, I didn't mention this, but I had put in my notes that we hear the Force theme. Like when he's looking at the picture of his family, the hollow of his family, you hear the Force theme. And I think that was sort of the foreshadowing of he has acknowledged this part of him that is his weakness. He has learned the lesson that Kanan has been trying to teach him, that he needs to let go of this attachment that he has to the idea of being with his family again, or getting revenge for them, or whatever the case may be. And, that has always made him vulnerable to the dark side. And now he's understanding that in order for him to go to the next level and to accept his mission, as we've been talking about, accept his vocation, that he has to let that go. He has to let them go. And so this idea that the Emperor doesn't understand of, not having attachments, not wanting those things for yourself, that's how Ezra ends up defeating essentially defeating the Emperor in this situation and overcoming the temptation. And now I think is the turning point to where he really opens up himself to giving himself for other people, the sacrificing himself for others, because he has made that decision that what I want is no longer what's most important to me. What's most important to me is other people and what the place that I play in this, this whole mission that we have.
Yeah, and what I really appreciated about that too was that, and we've been talking about this for the last number of episodes of him watching Kanan do the exact same thing, and Kanan sacrificing his life, and then Ezra struggling with that, and Ezra having to learn the lesson that Kanan wanted to teach him to let go, and then Ezra being able to do the same thing. I think that's just so crucial to who we are, because how we even learn how to deal with things is we look to those examples in our culture, in our society. We look to the saints, how did they deal with these things, and then we can learn from them, and then choose to live our life in the same way that they did. And Ezra does the same thing with Kanan and realizes, holding on to that or the fear of loss, that can be the pathway into that, grasping and the dark side, essentially. And he knows and has learned to let that go. And that allows him to be the hero, as the vocation that he's called to be. And he's able to live that out.
I also really like that this ties back to the sense of family that this show is all about, where the family that he's become part of, and you see this juxtaposition with the Imperial characters. All of the Imperial characters, they are part of this massive organization, right? And they fit into this organization, but they fit in the organization in a sense that they are there to protect themselves by being part of this faceless entity, right? Like, that other guy over there is going to get shot, not me. Whereas Ezra's family, the sense of family that he falls into, is he's self-actualized inside of that family. You see the relationship between him and Sabine grow. You see the relationship between him and Hera grow. It's not that he's just there as a part of this thing that protects him, but that he's there to protect them as well. And so they build each other up as they become more important to each other.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's the Empire being this this force, but in the sort of violent sense of force that is opposing the spiritual force that the good guys kind of use, and the Empire is using that violent force, and they kind of use this excuse. They tell people all the time, you see this in Star Wars all the time, where they're like, oh, we're keeping peace in the galaxy. You know, this is the way to keep peace in the galaxy, is to use force. You know, and that's that's sort of the lie that they tell themselves in order to make everything okay. You know, all their choices that they make as an Imperial officer or whatever the case may be. So I never really thought about that, but that's a great juxtaposition that we see there.
And you see the juxtaposition of, like, I don't want to be superficial about it, but the happiness level of, like, the Imperials versus the crew of the Ghost. I mean, you know, they're all suffering and you know, oppressed, but, like, being a part of a family in the midst of challenge and suffering is more joyful than sort of just being on the opposite end of that.
Right. And as cheesy as it is, you know, they're all very colorful, and the Empire is very, you know, black and white grays, nothing deviating from that.
So Ezra, I mean, this is the culmination of 4 seasons and 4 seasons of growth, is why he's able to face this temptation and acknowledge the pain of loss of his family, but not let that control his desires, and he lets them go. Back on the planet, we have the infiltration of the shield generator room, and there's kind of a lot of action that happens down there. Rook is back in full force, and at one point, Zeb actually has to he does something crazy because Gregor mentions that something drastic needed to happen, and so Zeb jumps off the ledge to try to get at Rook, and ultimately is able to pin Rook down in one of the shield generator coils, while the rest of the teams are taking over the balconies and stuff where all the control panels are. And that is finally the end of Rook as well. He didn't fall down a pit, but
we actually see him.
He fell just the right amount.
Right. No, there's that great moment with Mulch and Hondo, though.
Yeah.
Like, Mulch gets hit, and Hondo's like, no. That was classic.
I would tell them that he should be grateful. Like, he sees him waking up.
Well, and yeah, so Melch didn't die, you know, and I appreciated that comment from Hondo, because I mean, he acts all tough, and he's a pirate, and you know, it's all about him, but I mean, this totally shows how much he really cared for Melch when he thought that he was dead. And he's a softie. On the flip side, though, Gregor gets shot, and he doesn't survive that shot. Which was a bit disheartening, but understandable, I guess, as well. So Rex and Gregor are able to have a moment, which was cool, and Gregor was able to say, you know, this was something that we both chose to believe in and fight for, you know, which was, as opposed to something like the Separatist War, you know, that they were sort of just commissioned for, or even Order 66, where they weren't even able to control what they were able to do. Here was something they chose to fight for. Oh, I think I forgot to mention, at some point Chop gets fried. I think we mentioned that earlier. Yeah. Poor Chopper. But it is kind of funny. So after they do finally re-engage the shield generator, of course, at that exact moment, Thrawn was going to start, or no, so I guess I need to back up. Ezra has completely denied the temptation, and has he pulls the Jedi Temple down kind of upon himself and upon the hologram of the Emperor, and runs out. And you know, guards come in and try to kill Ezra, and he knocks them all off with rocks. And it's at that point that I think someone must have told Thrawn that the plan was going south. And so Thrawn decides to bombard the planet, And that's when, thankfully, the shield generator is activated, and Rook is killed, and the shield generator goes up right before the Star Destroyer starts to try to bombard the city again.
By the way, I was just thinking, I'm sorry, one quick thing about the droids. Is it just me, or is it like, it's almost like there's like the red shirt thing in Star Trek. Like there's just some droids that like just don't matter, and others that what happens to them doesn't matter because they'll be just fine. And you think of the ones on the Naboo, starfighter leaving, all just getting blasted one after the other, and for some reason no one can just hit R2. Or like
the Force is strong with him,
I guess. And who was Obi-Wan's and gets his whole head like sawed off on in the middle of the fight at the beginning of episode 3, and all he says is like, "Oh dear." I'm like, but he doesn't get any. You were more upset about Chopper when he got fried for like 2 seconds. But anyway, I just wanted to mention that. I'm sorry. It's like he's going to be okay.
Oh, it's Chopper.
And then there's C-3PO,
who
like falls in the middle of all of that. It's like, oh man, I wish he would get shot by a blaster bolt sometimes.
It's like the worst thing that happened to 3PO was that he actually had the memory wiped, after the prequel trilogy. He didn't get that back. R2 didn't save that stuff. He saved it in episode 9, apparently.
He was hoping for a reboot there. Yeah.
That's we could do a whole show on that. Did R2 give 3PO his whole memory back? Or just the part from 4 up? So
good question.
Anyway, sorry. Star Wars.
But I did think it was funny though that Chop wakes up because Sabine hits him.
Yeah.
So like an old computer, like just work and hit it.
Percussive maintenance, man. Sometimes percussive maintenance.
So she tells Chopper to contact the Ghost, and they are continuing to move forward with their mission. Ezra. I guess another thing to point out too was that once Ezra did deny that temptation, we get the flickering between the Palpatine of the white fatherly figure Palpatine and the Darth Sidious sinister hologram Palpatine, which was
that was interesting. I was like, how does that work?
Is that a dark side thing or a holographic malfunction thing?
Does the hologram interact with the Force?
Like we can do like the zoom backgrounds. He can do some sort of he can do some sort of foreground over himself, like an overlay.
Well, it's like all the AR filters on Instagram and some you can.
He had the puppy filter on, and then all of a sudden, no, there's no puppy filter. Whoa, put that back.
I'm sure he could probably just do a deep fake of what he used to look like over top of himself.
So yeah, I don't think there's anything really to say there, but I did want to bring that up. Ezra makes it to the bridge though, and finally has his final confrontation with Thrawn, and this is where we have the surprise twist of the finale that Thrawn is informed of approaching unidentified objects. I had to listen to that twice to make sure that it wasn't like they said objects, not ships. So it was very clearly they didn't know what this was. And Thrawn is confident that his blockade will handle it. We get a reference to Captain Palian, even though he's there for like 2 seconds. He was a key figure in Thrawn's life in the Legends novels. And I forget if he was in Rebels more than this, but that's beside the point. Purgils are what come to save the day. And
you mean space whales?
Space whales. Yes. Yes. Totally Ezra Bridger written all over that. It was really funny because I was doing some internet searches on them, and I think like some commentator commented like on season the Purgils were from season 2.
Mm-hmm.
And like somebody was like, this is just kind of a filler episode, and like not really much is happening. Like sure, it kind of deepens Ezra's connection to animals and such, but not really worth anything. And
so this actually bugged me. Until I sat down and like, okay, so I had to draw lines here because there's a thing about the Force users and their charisms, right? every Force user has their charism, and like if you look at I think Luke, we get the least out of his, like we don't really know what his is as much, but if you look at the rest of them, there's just like every one of them has kind of a focus. Obi-Wan's is very much the mind trick thing. We see that very intently. Yoda's is very much the patience and the ability to kind of see the Force outside of time, outside of the time that he's in. The Emperor's, I would say, is just the ability of suggestion, right? He can suggest to people things. And then there's Ezra, who the Emperor tries, and this is why I think the Emperor failed, right? Because the Emperor tries to play on what he thinks is Ezra's charism, which is this ability to bend time. And the only reason that the Emperor thinks that is because he saw Ezra inside of that, the bent time, the outside place, right? But the problem is that he didn't realize that what Ezra was doing was following two animals into that place, right? He followed the Lothwolf in, and then the owl was moving around inside of the space, and those two animals were his connection to that space. And then the Emperor failed at his temptation because he thought, oh, this kid's like, his charism is this time bending thing, and he didn't see past that to the fact that it's more this kind of connection with animals that was Ezra's real calling and real ability in the Force.
Well said.
Yeah, which I think kind of came home in this whole like scene of the the space whales coming in at the end to like I thought trounce everybody.
I thought you had a problem with the space whales in general.
No, it bothered me until I like sat down and like thought about all this, and I'm like, okay, like because I just Ezra's connection to animals is very apparent throughout the whole series, but like this scene, like that whole like concept of the charisms like really just caught me off guard, and then I was like, oh, okay, the Emperor misjudged. That's what he didn't have a good sense of it. He misgauged what the charism of Ezra Bridger was,
and I think that goes back to just the like we kind of mentioned that he didn't have nearly the time to like get to know Ezra in the same way that he could Anakin or potentially the Inquisitors.
Exactly.
So yeah, the space whales come and save the day, and that's exactly what Thrawn is unable to account for. And I'm sure you guys probably picked up on this too, but even the stance that Ezra has as he's using the Force to hold the door to keep the stormtroopers out and Thrawn pinned down is the same stance as Kanan when he sacrificed himself.
Yeah,
which was really, really good to see. Of course, Hera and Sabine are trying to get him to leave, and they recognize that the Purgles are going to launch him off into hyperspace, and Ezra embraces the fact that he's going to sacrifice himself for his family in this. And as they're launched off to hyperspace, the last words that he says is, and remember, the Force will be with you always.
So, okay, hear me out.
Yes.
But in this scene, I saw the ascension of Jesus. Because Ezra actually says, it's up to all of you now. Remember, the Force will be with you always. And everyone is staring up, right? And he also says he can't wait to come back. Dang. So to me, I saw all those things and I was like, Jesus, he's a very Christ figure, like in this scene. So what do you think? Am I crazy? Am I seeing things?
That is a phenomenal insight.
Yeah.
I mean, but that is exactly what Jesus did. Like he ascended into heaven and then sent the Paraclete to be with us. And in Ezra's case, that's the Force, more or less, and that eventually he will come back, and we think he'll come back at least. So no, I think
there's that line of like everyone's staring up at the sky.
Yep.
Yeah, they're still staring up at the sky even when like the Purgle go off like into hyperspace and everybody's just like kind of staring there and it's kind of quiet. It was, to me, it was like very like, silence. There was no music or anything. And then like in that moment I was like, oh my gosh. Scripture.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome analogy there. So Ezra succeeds in getting the Empire out of Lothal at that point, except for everyone who was still on the dome. At which point they're going to launch the dome and finally destroy it. Ryder gives Price an option for coming with them, but she's so kind of corrupted and prideful that she's going to stay and serve the Empire until the bitter end for her. And so they launch the dome, and the Ghost crew escapes through the viewport, and Sabine actually uses Ezra's lightsaber to break through, which was another cool moment for the two of them. They're saved by the Ghost, and they all escape, and they initiate the self-destruct on the dome as it's over the sea. And she says it's for Kanan and Ezra, and she blows it up. It kind of looked like fireworks from my perspective as watching that. But this giant thing in the sky that or I mean, it kind of looks like the Death Star exploding in episode 6 as well. On the Ghost, they find a recording from Ezra, who obviously either the Force kind of gave him a clue that this was going to happen, or he just assumed that this might happen, and he left a message for them. And he laments that this wasn't the path that he wanted, but it's the path that he had to go on, and that he was going to miss them. He tells Zeb that Zeb can have the top bunk back for now. He clarifies. He left I'm going to mispronounce this. Melirune? For Hera. It's a fruit.
Right.
It's the
fruit.
I have it written down, but it's yeah. Either way, he leaves a fruit for Hera in her cabin because it's her favorite. And again, reiterates to Sabine that he's counting on her. And
she's so frustrated too.
Yeah.
I know.
It's like, what do you mean? I know. What do you mean?
But then he also says that he couldn't have wished for a better family, and that he can't wait to come home. And meanwhile, Rex is already thinking strategy here, because he suspects that the Empire is going to come back and not let them keep Lothal, and that they're going to have to keep Lothal safe. And but ultimately they come to the conclusion that they think that Lothal will be able to defend itself against the Empire if it comes back. So they kind of fly over the city and see all the people celebrating in the streets from the liberation that happened. And then the episode ends with just a real cool kind of epilogue. Sabine kind of gives a voiceover of what happened in the next number of years, and relates that the Empire didn't come back to Lothal. And we learn that Zeb took Callus to the planet Lyrasan, where Callus realized that he hadn't actually destroyed the last of the Lasat people, and that he was welcome there. We learned that Hera and Rex both fought at the Battle of Endor, and we see Hera and Kanan's son, Spectre 7, Jason Syndulla. For those of you who are Legends fans, that is a very key name in the Legends universe. In the Legends universe, one of Han and Leia's sons was named Jason. So I know that's where they pulled that name from. Sabine finally kind of realizes that Ezra was counting on her not just to protect Lothal, but ultimately to come find him. And the entire scene ends with Ahsoka arriving, and her and Sabine heading off to find Ezra to bring him home.
It was so cool to see this ancient, wise Ahsoka in her robes. Oh my gosh. I think that was my favorite part.
Do you know what any of the stuff means, like her staff? And I've never really looked into it too much.
I don't think so. I think it's all, that's her appearance at that point.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it kind of visually gives off the sense of a wise, Jedi, kind of a master sort of feel, even though she is no Jedi. She's a wise non-Jedi.
I believe episode 5 or 6 of Mando season 2 is called The Sorcerer. So we'll see. I don't know. That'll be fun.
That's kind of the rumor, although I'm still so thankful that there hasn't been any like official sort of releases on what's to come, other than the teaser, which thankfully, just like the first one, didn't really give us anything to go on other than some really cool visuals and
Well, and I don't know how the episodes, supposedly line up, but I saw somewhere, I think Favreau wrote most of them this time around, but I think Dave Filoni wrote one episode, or someone said. So my guess would be, if you're going to have Ahsoka pop up briefly, do it in one episode, have Dave Filoni write it. Like, why would you do it any other way? She's totally his character, So that's my hope. We'll see. Maybe she'll be wearing that robe again, and she's like, here's what this is. No.
Yeah. Well, and I hope I hope that they use the Mandalorian as a launching point for a bunch of other things, because I want the Mandalorian to maintain its own integrity. Yeah. Like, I don't want it to be subsumed by all the other possible characters that could be jumping in and out, So
right.
Well, I like the Boba Fett might be a one-off. I like that Ahsoka might be a one-off. And keep the Mando and the child.
I would expect that to happen, because even Rebels itself was very clearly not meant to be a sequel to the Clone Wars, and yet they still brought in Ahsoka and Rex, but it still felt very clearly all centered on the Ghost crew, even with the peripheral characters that we knew from the Clone Wars. And if
it's not, you don't get like a season 5 of Rebels. It's no, Rebels is done, but here these it's a neat way to do it.
And with Filoni, co-writing co-leading the series, I think we're in good hands. Any final thoughts on the Rebels finale from any of you three?
No,
I thought it was fantastic. Like, I think
great.
I think it was really interesting that it really did answer a lot of interesting questions that I didn't have before this episode popped up. Right, so like the specific charism issue, that I brought up, like about what is Ezra's real call in the Force. I didn't have that question before you got to this episode, and you're like, oh wait, the Emperor sees this other thing. But no, when you really hone it in, that he's about the animals. That's like that's his thing. And then, a couple of other little things about the family issues that he was having that just got really pulled to the forefront, especially the being an individual and growing inside of a family, and how that's different from just existing as part of an organization. That's not something that I had thought of before this episode, and it really got pushed to the forefront by the interactions and the way that they played off of each other, the different types of characters that they had.
Well, I think then that is it from us. Listeners, of course, what did you guys think of the Rebels finale? And definitely let us know what you thought and what you thought of our discussion. And you can let us know by emailing us, or you can comment on our Facebook or Twitter page and let us know that way. Our email is starwars@sqpn.com, and you can find StarQuest on Facebook at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, and of course on Twitter at SQPN. And as always, we'd like to take a moment now and thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Wars, including this week, Jordan B., Kim C., Eddie S., Robert R., and Pamela G. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Wars and all the various shows that we do here at StarQuest. And please, if you'd like to join them, you can do so by visiting sqpn.com/give. Also, of course, be sure to subscribe to the show so you can listen to our episodes as they go live, and you can listen in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or any of your favorite podcast apps. And you can find SQPN on YouTube, and just make sure to click the bell to receive notifications when new episodes drop so you can listen in. You can find all previous episodes of The Secrets of Star Wars by going to sqpn.com/Star Wars. And we will be back in 2 weeks, where we will be revving up for The Mandalorian Season 2. Super, super exciting. So we are going to take an episode and we're going to discuss all things The Mandalorian Season 1. So, and we're going to kind of focus or use the docu-series on Disney Plus, the Disney Gallery, The Mandalorian, is kind of a launching point to discuss The Mandalorian Season 1. So we'll be kind of, a year later talking about everything that happened a year ago as we're preparing for The Mandalorian Season 2, which is going to start streaming on October 30th. So definitely exciting month to be a Star Wars fan and a Mandalorian fan. So until then, Angela Cialana, thank you for joining us and sharing the secrets of Star Wars.
My pleasure.
Thomas Sanjurjo, thank you for joining us this evening as well.
May the Force be with you always.
And Mike Creevy, thanks for joining us this evening.
Always a lot of fun.
And once again, I'm Father Andrew Kinstetter. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Wars on StarQuest.